There we go. While the last people are trickling in the chat, I have a very important question. Do you think that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are a real couple? Please add to the chat if you think that they are a real couple while we wait for the rest of the people to join. Yeah. It is interesting, Victoria. It's a very interesting one. Carrie says that her chat is disabled. Yeah, so Carrie, what I should have specified is that since it's a panel discussion, that if you guys want to make any comments even, then you would go to the Q&A section, and then you can add to that with your answer to the very important question.
So, Sophia, it is time. Are we ready?
We're ready to go.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, giving up your precious time. I know it is so crucial, and we want to say thank you right from the start. Welcome to the professional development session, practical strategies and tips for all educators with language learners. We'll be placing information in the chat in a second about how to receive CTLE hours for attending today's session. We want to thank our moderator, our panelists, and Lita Carbone from Online Learning Services for making this all possible. You are welcome to participate with questions in the Q&A area on the screen. We will try to respond to as many as possible, so keep it coming. That's a great way to interact. Right now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, who will then introduce the panelists. Sophia Peljevic has 10 years of experience as an elementary teacher in New York City public schools. She is the new temporary coordinator for student teaching here at the College of St. Rose, and also an adjunct instructor at the College of St. Rose teaching elementary and early childhood courses. She frequently works directly with teachers and their professional development. Sophia holds a bachelor's degree in child education, a master's degree in literacy from the College of St. Rose, and we're thrilled to have this wonderful moderator and this great panel. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that intro. Feels so special. Okay, so here we have a great panel, guys. They are it's a mix of wonderful people who work in schools. So we have John Hart, and he's a 7th grade social studies teacher. If you can't find John, please raise your hand just to make sure that we know that John is John. Thank you. Okay. Yes. John Hart is a 7th grade social studies teacher at Farnsworth Middle School in the Guilderland Central School District. He's also a recent graduate of the College of St. Rose and graduated in 2023 with a degree in adolescent education, social studies. All of my middle school and high school people, God bless you. Really, you do great work. And then we have Sarah Hendry as well. Sarah, if you want to do a little wave, I know we can see all of your names, but just, Sarah Hendry is an ENL teacher in the Bronx in New York City, and she holds a bachelor's of science in childhood special ed from the College of St. Rose, and has a master's of science in teaching English language learners from Syracuse, and is currently pursuing a master's in educational leadership from the College of St. Rose. They just keep coming back, guys. And then we have Jessica McClasko. Little wave. There she is. Jessica McClasko is a related services teacher from the Shenendehowa, is a word I trip up on, Central School District. She has been teaching for 8 years and enjoys her role as the English as a new language teacher for grades K through 5. Her position allows her the flexibility to meet students' needs through both pushing into classrooms and pulling students out for individualized instruction. And then we have Nadia Rubino right there. Nadia is a special ed educator at Brighter Choice Charter School for Girls. She holds a dual cert in special ed and childhood ed, servicing grades 1 through 6, and she's entering her 5th year as a teacher in the Brighter Choice Charter School. And then last but certainly not least, we have Jada Settle. And Jada's over there. Jada is a teaching assistant at the Pine Hills Elementary School in Albany. And she works primarily with kindergarten and 1st grade. And Jada holds a bachelor's degrees in African Studies and English from the University at Albany. And Jada also brings like a wealth of experience working as a TA for the Fresh Air Fund, a child care specialist at St. Catherine's Children's Center, and a program facilitator for the Madison Square Boys and Girls Club. So as you can tell, we have a great group of people that are here, and we have a great set of questions as well for you guys. And feel free, like we mentioned, if you have any questions or if you want to add to what we have been talking about, feel free to click on the Q&A portion, and then you can ask it, even if it's not a question and you just want to add a comment, you can do that there. And then as we go along, if there are any questions, then we do have people, and so we'll make sure and do our best to answer those questions as well as we're going along. So, okay, let's get started. So our first question is to describe your relationship with the ENL teacher at your school. So whoever wants to chime in first, and now I know we have a few that are the ENL teachers at their school. So then how is your relationship with the classroom teachers that you work with?
So I can start us off with this question. Mm-hmm. So far in my new position at Farnsworth, I haven't been here for too long, but my relationship with the ENL teachers is still growing. At my student leave or my student teaching placement and my leave position just after, I had a little bit of time to gain a very strong relationship with the ENL teacher. And I quickly learned that how valuable and how much ENL teachers care. And to build a positive relationship with your ENL teacher is super, super important. ENL teachers are absolutely brilliant. They could have students of all different languages in the room at the same time and find a way to reach each of them. So it's very important to keep that strong relationship with them. And to have that strong relationship, you can learn a ton from an ENL teacher. So it's super important. Reach out to them, become a partner, and figure out what the types of best strategies that they use are.
That's wonderful. And you were also mentioning, so you're in a 7th grade classroom, so you're in like a middle school setting. How does that relationship kind of change? Because K-5 looks different from then, because middle school, they're all like, going to different classrooms. So how does that kind of look for how you're supported in the middle school setting?
So with the middle school, as we change classrooms, it's important. So not only for me to have a tight relationship with that ENL teacher, but also the rest of my team. Because middle school is terrifying for so many people. And then let's take middle school and put it in a different language. That's even more terrifying. So in middle school, there's so much going on. And then we shift this language, and it can be such a stressful time. It can be such kind of just a lost time, a lost feeling for these students. So in middle school, I feel it's especially important to have this team bonding all around, to kind of everybody have that relationship with their ENL teachers.
Great point. Who else would like to add?
Sophia, I can add. I am the ENL teacher on my grade team, and I've been working with them for about 4 years now. So we've built that relationship over the past 4 years. And they just know me to be the resource in the school. And I also
build that relationship with them.
We make sure we're on the same page. So that's crucial. You make sure you're on the same page. Your expectations are held the same. How you hold your students accountable is the same across all the classes you work with. Like I said, I've been fortunate to be on the same grade team for 4 years. So, just kind of, it's like a family. You want to make sure your team is a family in a middle school. right now I'm trying to build a relationship with my high school teachers. So that's a little different because they don't see me as frequently in their building. So you always want to make sure as an ENL teacher, you are the resource for your building.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. Jess?
I wanted to add on to that. I'm an ENL teacher, grades K through 5. And if you're a classroom teacher, give it more than 1 year, because when I first started, I was working K through 5, and I guess like someone coming into your classroom, it's not always that easy to kind of like be flexible and allow another teacher in there to work with you. But there are teachers that I've been working with for 7, 8 years now, and it really just takes more than 1 year to build that relationship. Luckily, most of my grade levels, if they are considered the ENL co-taught class, they will take that more than 1 year, because they know like the longer we work together, the better it is, because we just keep growing year after year. Some grade levels, they rotate who takes that, which I appreciate, because that it means that other teachers want to work with me and want to work with English language learners, but it is hard to build that relationship when you bounce from teacher to teacher. So just give it more than 1 year, because the first year it might not be smooth working with another teacher, but it kind of just takes trust and time to build those relationships.
And I think that you're all bringing up really, really great points, and especially in the fact of whether you're in a classroom position. I know that I see that Sharon, you had mentioned that you're a special area teacher, and the ENL teacher is really supportive for you. Or it's a big support for you when you have the students come to your classroom. And so from the perspective of being either a classroom teacher, a special area teacher, that, you know, to try to be as open for your classroom for the ENL teacher, because they are there just to support you and to make you feel more confident in your teaching. And also for if you're just starting out as an ENL teacher, to take your time, right? And that you will build those like relationships, but it does take time for sure. So that's great. Anyone else wanted to add to that? How your relationship with the ENL teacher, or how is your relationship with the ENL teacher at your school?
I can, oh, sorry, Jada, I'll let you go first.
Actually this year, it's been a month that I, not as a TA, but I've actually joined the classroom as a kindergarten teacher this year for another month or so. And in Pine Hills, we actually gained, the focus. We gained a whole new ENL department. So we have all new ENL teachers, and it's been, I wouldn't say a struggle. They're amazing teachers. They have come from different backgrounds, so it's super helpful. We have one who's Arabic speaking, and in Albany that is such a huge help, because they're able to connect with her to so many different schools. And we're just in, she pushes in, and she's helpful when she pulls out, and it's just been a great help, and with time will help build that. But it's definitely different where I'm hearing everyone building these relationships over years, but it's a start, and then, you know, a whole new ENL department. So this will be an interesting year for sure.
That's great. Yeah, it's again, it's about building relationships, and relationships aren't built solidly within the first 6 months or like year. So taking your time and giving both people grace, or both like groups grace, and learning to work together. And then Nadia, did you want to share?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to sort of be on, I'd say sort of both ends of that. So I started off as a classroom teacher, teaching first grade, and had the fortunate opportunity to work closely with the ENL teacher. And we had a really great co-teaching model. So I think in addition to what everyone said, just maintaining that flexibility, but also noting that you can learn so much from them, as well as, you know, there may be some insight that you have about your specific scholars, and that collaboration can be really effective for the ones you teach. And then on the flip side, so I currently teach special education, and I still converse with our E&L teacher so much about just the supports and a lot of the overlap. So I think, like everyone here has said, they can be a huge wealth of knowledge, and I think they're a great resource to tap into for sure. So.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So the next question that we have is, how are cultures celebrated and supported at your school? Do you think that more can be done to celebrate cultures? Yeah, I'm going to leave that open to you guys about how cultures are celebrated and supported at your school. Nadia?
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. I would say our school has definitely been more reflective, I feel, in the past year as far as acknowledging the diverse cultures within our school and languages. We just this past summer had a professional development on that was led by our E&L teacher about just the work she does, so that all of us at his school had more of a consensus as far as not just the different languages that our scholars speak in the building, but also some of the cultures and norms and things of that nature. So that especially was really eye-opening, so that we were more sort of on the same page to begin with. But I will say in the past year, we've adjusted our yearly plan just so that we could acknowledge more of those Muslim holidays. We do have a huge population of students at our school that are Muslim, and that's made it easier for those scholars who may be fasting some days and are having that harder time to focus during those scheduled instructional days to have that time to truly focus on their religious practices. So.
And you bring up a really good point too, Nadia, and I'm curious to kind of add to that question, like how cultures are celebrated and then also like with that supported part, right? So if there's people who are celebrating holidays and they are fasting or any of those situations, then like, is that done at your school? Is that addressed? So does anyone else want to add on to that?
Sure, I can, Sophia. So in my school, we have a large Hispanic population, so we celebrate Latinx. We do a day of celebration. We also partner with a local school here in the Bronx that is a Jewish school. So we send some of our 8th graders over there to have community-wide dialogues where they learn about the Holocaust and other cultures that way. And in our school during Ramadan, we have a special place for our kids to go eat that are fasting, so they can just come hang out with the teachers while they're on their fast.
That's great. Yeah. Did you want to add, Nadia?
Yeah, sorry, I also forgot to mention, our school, I think, does something also that's really great for those same population of scholars that need that space to pray. So they've been allotted a certain space to come to several times a day where they're excused from classwork and activities to pray.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jess?
Recently, over the past couple of years, the special education teacher and I in my school started the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Committee in our school. And once a month, we do an assembly and we try and highlight whether it's a holiday or we do a big like Autism Acceptance Month. And we invite students and families if they want to present something or read a book if they celebrate that holiday, and it really helps getting the students involved. And it allows other students and their classmates to say, oh, you know, my friend celebrates this holiday. And then just individually, I know different teachers invite parents in or do celebrations depending on the students that are in their class. So yeah, so we plan that. And I know pre-COVID, Shenendehowa had a district community-wide celebration called Sensational. And it was great. We had people from the community come in and they did dances from different cultures. And we had people come up and set up stands from different countries, and they had food, and it was just a huge community-based event. We tried to do it virtually. There's no comparison. And we're
Was
trying
that
to
done in
bring
like
it
a
back.
gym, or was it in like a, like
It
where
was in the
was
high
that?
school, and parts of it was in like the auditorium where there was like a fashion show. People could wear clothing from their different cultures, and then it was in the cafeteria. It really took up like a huge part of the high school.
Oh,
And
that's
we're
great.
hoping to bring that back soon, but we haven't been able to really get it going, but it was huge.
That's awesome. And was that with just your school, or was
Nope,
it?
that was the whole district plus like groups in the community. Like there was like dance committees and dance clubs that would come in and do it.
That's amazing. And that's great because you're getting the whole community involved. So it's not just your school, it's not, and it's like the whole district. And has anyone else had any experiences in terms of like having their students kind of lead, if there's a culture and to celebrate them? Has there been like chances where you've had students be able to kind of lead in that? That is a question for everyone. No. Okay. All right. Well, then we will move on to the third question. So, in the classroom, this is kind of a mixture. Last year. In the classroom, what are some strategies or approaches that you take with English language learners in your classroom? So as a reminder, we have a lot of different classroom settings. We have middle school, we have the ENL teacher, so we can talk about pushing in and pulling out, and then also other supports and classroom teacher supports. So who wants to start us off?
I think that some of the strategies to take, I know I've heard a couple people, I've heard stories of people who will kind of argue that having to make things in multiple languages could add a lot of work, when in reality, it doesn't have to. It's just adding a different type of work. And a lot of the strategies that you can use to help your ENL students are also strategies that will help every single other student in the room. So by doing things like anytime there's a large set of directions, adding pictures along with them. So that can help not just your ENL students, but that helps everybody else who has to read that set of directions. So that's something I like to do as well. Having multiple ways to show information. So kind of the same thing where you would have a picture maybe within the directions. Another example could be when you are maybe doing a long lecture, you would also have your slides behind you in much more condensed forms, much easier ways to grasp that content, providing a different access points. Another thing that is a strategy that I think is overlooked a lot is whenever you're playing a video, putting closed captions on. That's another example that's very, very quick and easy to do. It's one little click, but I think a lot of people forget that one sometimes. So that's just like a couple really tiny examples that I have had a lot of success with in helping my students in the room. Like I've said, I've noticed those strategies for the ENL students, they really do help everybody else in the room as well.
That's great. The closed captioning one is like, yeah, it seems like the most obvious. Who is going to continue?
Definitely all of those. I love that. And I love that as a classroom teacher, you're using those. I think another like kind of easy one is when working in pairs or groups, pairing a native strong student up with an English language learner is huge because they're getting the modeling of correct English. And I feel like it also helps the English speaker because it helps them with confidence, and it makes them feel good that they're helping another student. And not only putting pictures with directions, but just writing out directions in general. I know a lot of teachers are used to being able to just tell the students what to do, and especially multi-step directions, it's really important to write them down, because then if the students are starting to read, they can refer back to them. visuals for everything. Even especially another thing is activating their background knowledge. So if you're going to go ahead and teach about a new topic, think about what students may not have been exposed to before. We used to have a writing prompt at my school, and it was a how-to writing piece, and the students were supposed to write, it was first grade, how to build a snowman. Well, some of my students have never experienced snow before. So some of my teachers either showed a video, which was great, or they had like Play-Doh or molding clay, and they went through it like, okay, so first you would do this, and kind of built it with them, so that like we are scoring their writing. We're not scoring like, do they actually know how to build a snowman? Because it just it levels the playing field for them if they have like some background knowledge on a topic.
That's great. The background knowledge is so interesting. It kind of made me think about in terms of what are some like assumptions. I'm kind of getting off on a different topic, but what are some of the assumptions that maybe that you've experienced or that you've shared with other classroom teachers that you've worked with, where you thought maybe English language learner wouldn't know much about, but then you were surprised because they did know, or they were able to do something that you thought that they might have not been capable of? Does anyone have any experiences with that and being impressed, and that they knew more than you might be and anticipated that they would?
Yeah, I think it's important to really, when they come to your school, look at their enrollment information, because that does tell you a lot about their background in their schooling. Did they go to school in their native country? Were they already in the United States but not in New York State? That always like plays a big part. And I try to have those one-on-one conversations with my new kids that enroll in my school, because for me, at the secondary level, I go based on the nicest lot score reports, because my students are at the expanding level when they get to secondary school, which in the secondary level, you're going to run into those long-term Ls that have been here for 7+ years. So that's a little different than, at the primary level. So at the secondary level, we want to move them. So when I have kids come to me in 8th grade, I really teach out of the box. So when I'm doing my pull-out sessions and I teach in the hallway, so I make my kids get up and we walk around and we start talking to staff members in my building to get them to feel comfortable just having conversations. Because when they go in the classroom, sometimes I have to work with teachers to call on them, but they start to become comfortable real quick and they move faster once we start doing that. And then in the classroom, I always make sure they have like different anchor charts that are individualized for them based on what we're teaching in the classroom. Because my kids are at the expanding level, I don't have to do a lot of modifications or accommodations, because we want to provide that challenge for them to grow.
That's also great. And you bring up a good point about also conversation, right? So sometimes the supports could be that it's maybe if they have to raise their like hand and answer questions, they might not be as comfortable doing that. But the conversation and being in a smaller group and talking to adults, and so they have that time to think and express what they want to say, then they feel more comfortable and then gain more confidence. Jada, did you want to add? And then there's some questions that I want in the chat that I want to address as well.
Yeah, concerning the background information, I also think it's super important. This year at Pine Hills for kindergarten, for the first year, we had screened our kids, where we had the parents come in and separated the kindergartners when they went to the other teachers. We assessed them, and we really got to speak with the kids to see what resources they need. So for our ENL kids, we figured out that, okay, this student might be ELL, let's test them now and wait 2 weeks in so that we can give them the help that they need right away to optimize that instructional time so that they can succeed. So I got to speak with the parents, and also it was great to address the misconceptions with ELL too, with the parents too at the time. And I think that background information, the parents, having the conversations with the parents, if possible, translators there, talk with them and really get to the bottom of what's Because we had a lot of ELL kids this year that we actually had to split them into 2 full classes. So it's a lot of work, but the parents have been very helpful in just speaking with them to get them in the loop of things.
That's great. Thank you. Did anyone else want to share in terms of what other strategies? And then I was going to move on to the questions. There's a few questions and ideas that were also shared. Yeah, Nadia.
I was just going to piggyback off of what Sarah had mentioned as far as the NICETEL. So this, I would say this is the first year in which we had a professional development for our school, led by that ENL teacher, so that she could not only explain her role, but also sort of dive into those what is that assessment? Sorry, dive into the NICETEL assessment and show us sort of like a chart as far as what each of the different levels entail and the skills that coincide with each level. So that's been a really helpful resource. So one additional support this year school-wide has been having those NICETEL scores, whichever level in which they're at, shared with the classroom teachers for those specific scholars, so that when they are giving those differentiated assignments and what have you, it's really tiered to what they specifically need. So you have some scholars who, while visuals are so helpful, I think for both the ELLs and for SPED, you'll have some that could also benefit from some things being highlighted more or just less language on the page, things of that nature. So
Yeah, that's great to point out. Okay, so we had a Melissa who also said that she's done Think Inc. Pair and Share. Have you guys heard about that in your schools? And really it's that whole ink part is that so for some students who have difficulty with either writing or coming up with the ideas, they can also draw them. So, you know, we've all probably heard about a Think, Pair, Share, but I love the Think, Inc, Pair, and Share kind of thing. That's great. And then Donna had a question. Donna said, I currently have a student in the Regents chemistry class who knows no English. I pair her with another Spanish speaking student who knows a little English. She spends most of her time using Google Translate. What strategies can I use to help her?
So for the high school level, you know, at the end of the year, they have to get a 65 now on the Regents, regardless of the language they speak. And not all Regents exams are translated into their native languages. So you can Google online the bilingual chemistry dictionary. That's going to be helpful, and it's given out by NYU Steinhardt. And that's what schools provide to their students for state exams. It's the same exact bilingual glossary, and it's content specific. Now, those content words will be translated into Spanish or the native language of the student. But, you know, on the Regents, she will have to respond in English. So really trying to encourage as much as she can and make sure you're partnering with your school's ENL teacher if there is one in your high school.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Did anyone else want to add to that? Any other supports? I know that, and then Jeanette has said, it's important to not assume that our L's are familiar or have the knowledge of academic material that we present. And that's absolutely true too, right? Just kind of to introduce them to the materials, because sometimes they wouldn't have had experience using them. And then we had someone who we don't know who the name is, but this kind of ties in, and really what Sarah had said, it also ties into our next question. Someone mentioned that I thought it was odd that one of the state tests was given last year during Ramadan. And that was a topic because there was a lot of issue that fell into students participating in the state test if they chose to because of that. And it, you know, might have been an oversight. The question that was prepared was that state testing is always a hot topic. So I'm curious to share if you guys can share what the narrative at your school is when it comes to English language learners taking the state test. So Sarah, you kind of touched on this at the beginning, but what are some of the ways that you support them in preparing for the state test? Which, you know, we don't always love to talk about, but it does happen. And I think it would be just good to hear how each schools maybe approach them differently.
I can start this off. In my school, we're test prep heavy, so we have a whole test prep program where we do we practice exams. We teach them various strategies and skills throughout the school year. And you know, we make sure they have the bilingual glossaries for the exams. We make sure that is provided for them. If we can have the test translated in any other language, so for math and science in 8th grade and 6th and 7th for math, we make sure we provide that as well. In the high school, we try to provide the Regents exams translated, the ones that are available. You know, test prep is hard especially if you have a first year L, they're going to be exempt from their state exam the first year they're here.
Thanks, Sarah. Anyone else want to add to that? So that's like the high school perspective. Anyone in like the K through 5?
One thing that I think is like, I don't know, like on a line of like, I don't know if I should say this, but I do think it's important to let the parents know that opting out is an option, because native English speakers know that it is an option, and it might be something that is kind of overlooked, or there's a miscommunication and my parents don't know that it's an option. So I don't sway them one way or another. I'm like, listen, they can try it and it is what it is, or this is your option. You just have to send a letter in, because it might be that miscommunication where they don't know that they're allowed to, or it's important to let them know, hey, guess what's coming up, because they may have that miscommunication. They don't even know the state tests are going on, that kind of thing. So I let my parents know, if you do not feel they are able to take this test, if you think it is too much, just write a letter and they will go to the cafeteria with the other kids with a book. And it's fine. But I think it's important to give them that same, equity as other kids, to know that that is their choice if they choose to do so.
You bring up a really good point too, Jessica, where you're in terms of, if some of us here who are participants are in a classroom, but then also some of us might be graduate students also. And so maybe that's also a conversation or a question that you ask within an interview of, like asking what the perspective of that school is in terms of state testing. Because I know, Sarah, that in the city, the conversation about a state test is it is heavy on test prep. There's a lot more that's aligned to it in terms of funding and all of that kind of stuff for the schools. But then in other places right outside of the city, that's not the same conversation that is happening. And so that's why, so maybe it is something that you want to consider either looking at or asking when you go into interviews as well.
Well, I think also, Sophia, it also depends if you're in the New York City Department of Ed or charter. I work in a charter, so that also plays a part of it. Charter schools are mostly test heavy when it comes to preparation for state exams.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. I would say, because I worked in the New York City schools, as Christy had mentioned, and we were in a public school, and it was kind of the same thing in terms of like test prep and all of that stuff. And that was in a K through like 5 school. So not to knock it, it was a great 10 like years there, but just something to always consider. And then Yolanda had asked, what is the Think Inc. Pair and Share is just when you're thinking about the idea, then you can also, you don't necessarily have to write it down. You can also draw a picture of it. If I'm correct, who had wrote the Think? I think that was also answered. So whoever had mentioned the Think Pink Air, that might've been dismissed. So if you could just also elaborate that again. Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. Okay. And you can feel free to correct what I said if I did misspeak on that. And then Vic Victoria asked, how do you support students that are considered nonverbal, non-vocal, and also are an English language learner?
So I actually had that same, I'm actually dealing with it right now. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up if you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Mhm.
I talked with a speech. I always talk with the speech pathologist here at the school, and they help me out with that because with an ELL, with an English language learner and the nonverbalness, I heard that there's a period of mute that they have when they come from when they're speaking two languages at home. So at home they could be having these conversations in their native language, and when they come to school they could be presenting as nonverbal. But it's important to just take your time with them and to just give them that grace and start small. With my student, we try not to push him because he gets a little emotional when you kind of push him to speak, but we've been seeing a huge improvement giving him that space. It's taking him about a month to really settle in, and he's still presenting that way. However, they say it takes a few months. It varies from home to home, but they do have a period of mute when they're speaking two languages at home. That's for the K through 5 level. I'm not sure if the kid is in an older grade, but for them, they just say with time. And it's good. It's great to be in constant contact with the speech pathologist so that they are also on the radar. Because if they were able to get speech, ELLs cannot receive speech if they are considered a language learner. So that's a tough part too with it. I wish the rules can change because sometimes there are underlying issues and that could cause them not to be speaking, which is some the nonverbal concerns that you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Any other insight? State testing, how else to support them? We kind of went off on a tangent, so but it was about, what was a narrative and the state test supports and all that. I think we did cover it though.
Also, sorry, non-verbal cues are also great. Even if it's a picture, if you want them to answer you in like a yes, maybe you have a thumbs up nearby with them. If it's a no, maybe a thumbs down, something that they can refer to if they're not speaking to you, and maybe have it translated also in English and in their native language. That would be helpful so that they're also able to communicate with you even if they're not speaking. Because it's
And that's
also
great because it's all celebrated that they're responding to you, right? So you say
right,
like,
because you want to know that they are listening to you. Do you understand me is also a big thing because if they're nonverbal, it's like, are you getting that they are understanding you? And that could be also an issue too. So having those the visual cues there too.
thank you. And then Carrie had a clarifying question, and I don't necessarily know the answer to this either. So, but Jada, I think you mentioned it. So, new language learners cannot receive speech and language if they're identified as an English language learner, then they're not allowed to. Then they're not able to get speech support, or is that anyone can chime in on this one? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. In SPED, I'm assuming maybe getting them into a tier 2 intervention if the MTSS track, I think, because I'm trying to understand where the SPED part that's coming in. Is there any academic concerns with
Yeah, I think
that?
that we're talking about if the student is a like non-like verbal student, and then so they also working with the speech and language working with the speech and like language teacher or the out of classroom support. But I think there was a confusion in if they are still able to get services for their speech if they're English language learners.
They technically cannot. It would take, for my school, the rule is if they are ELL, unless they test out, they're not getting those speech services. They're not in that SPED. They're not identified unless the next move would be to discuss with the committee in your school who's in charge of the SPED department to see what they can do. And if there's other issues arise, you have to kind of present that to them, that even though he or she is receiving these ELL services, we have some other concerns, and then you address that with the SPED department after school.
Gotcha.
How long do you wait? It really depends. Typically, you start bringing up issues 6 to 8 weeks into the school with the right data that they have. Then that's when you can start going into the next steps. It's very hard to get other services for ENL students. It's very hard. You have to exhaust all your options.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say, is it's like everyone, like, we want early intervention, we want kids to get what they need, but when you throw a language on top of it, you have to make sure it's more than just language learning. So there is a document, and it's like, okay, is it language or is it more? And it kind of compares the two. And I've just constantly like highlighting, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's this. It's like, it's a headache. It's hard. There's like a questionnaire and a document, and you have to like do home visits and ask about like the background, and it's hard. I've done it, but it's lengthy because you want to make sure that second language acquisition, all the needs are met, the language proficiency, like they are not making progress, to prove that it's not just language. So like if you have a kid coming in who's nonverbal, are they nonverbal or are they just in their silent period? It's hard.
I think also you have to look at how long the child has been in the school system. They say to wait about 3 years before you even make that determination. And that's why in 2015, New York had changed the CR Part 154, which are the rules and regulations around this, where each school should have a language proficiency team that has your CSE, your committee on special ed, a special educator, general educator, your ENL teacher, and that's when you bring all your data together to make the determination. I just did this with one of my kids I've had since 7th grade, and I knew there's something wrong with his speech, and I've had multiple conversations with his parents, and he's in 10th grade now. So last year, mom again requested the evaluation. Now, if the parents are requesting the evaluation, it works a little faster. So I always have that interview with my parents to make sure there was not an issue they were aware of before coming into my school or into the United States. In this case, there was, so we were able to move quicker to get him to qualify for speech.
To piggy off of Sarah, just that was like, she took it out of my mouth. Yes, if the parents, if they really find a concern and they also feel like there's something going on, an underlying issue, they having their input and talking to their primary doctor about some developmental problems, and that will make it move faster. That will let us know, okay, maybe there's something else that's happening, and it's not just the silent period, and it's not just the language barrier that's causing them, but the parents going out and talking to the primary doctor. That's a huge thing too.
Yeah, Nadia.
I would like to add on. I was just going to say as well, it might be helpful too to see as well what additional supports the school can provide as well. So I think it's this year our school had just started, as part of that screening process, interviewing those ELLs in their home language with a translator present. So there's sort of 2 interviews done. So the first interview is in English to assess, but then there's that second layer. So we get to see if that scholar is expressing themselves in their native language and to what degree. So then we can address if there is, more of a language or speech concern.
That's great. Yeah, I think I'm going to skip around a little bit, but Carrie had said like, okay, so it is not a state law or similar. Obviously, kids who speak other languages but still have language processing or developmental delays. And I think that's what you guys were kind of saying, right? That like, you know, that it could be a language or a language restraint, but it also could be something else. And so, but you need to go through the process in order to get through that. So give them the chance to kind of fit or to like see how things go within the year, or but stay on top of it and essentially trust your instincts as a teacher to, you know, notice if there's any kind of struggles, and if the struggles are related to their language learning, or if it's related to a processing issue or a like speech issue as well. I think something that gets lost in the speech issue is the processing. So a lot of people might assume that the speech issue is how they're saying words, but it could also be how long it takes them to also respond. And so that's also something to keep in like mind. But yes, Carrie, it's not necessarily a state law, but it is something that the schools typically will might give you a little bit more pushback on giving them any kind of an IEP for if they are an English language learner. And then Michelle had asked a question: how can you best support an ELL who also appears to have special needs and might be on the spectrum? I think we touched on that, but if anyone wants to elaborate a little bit more.
I think, you know, knowing their IEP is key. Just like any special ed student you would work with. And then providing, because the strategies are similar for special ed and ENL, that you just provide any opportunity for them to acquire the language, to participate in language acquisition activities. You know, I feed a lot with my special ed teacher on my team, so we kind of just make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, and if they're appearing to be on the spectrum or have any special needs and they don't have an IEP, it's great to bring that attention to the SPED department at your school, just to let them know, just so that this kid is on the radar. Same thing with my kid. I just let the speech pathologist know, my SPED teacher, like, hey, he's on my radar. I just want you to be aware of this. Sorry, my all blurry. Just to be aware of it so that they can also be seeing things, and also always keep data, always keep stuff that they're giving you. Always, if they're doing a worksheet, if they're having activities, jot things down. Just always know how their progression, so that when it's time to have a meeting or a discussion, you can bring this to the table and say, well, other than this, he's also presenting this and X, Y, and Z.
That's great. Yeah, because it really is. It's just about supporting the like student and having the most information and examples, right, to prove that and to just be able to best support them. And then we have Kimberly Myers, who said that she's a speech teacher and she has students who are English language learners, and they were assessed in both languages and had a need in their native language. So that's also a possibility. And I wanted to jump back into Melissa, who said that in District 20, they all began the curriculum into reading, and it's setting the students up with terms that will include all that are included in the assessments. So teaching first grade, they are already working with author's purpose and central idea. So that kind of ties back into our state testing kind of question with, yeah, some of those things, because the vocabulary is the biggest thing that they teach, right? How to read the question, how to process them. So that's great that you have a curriculum like that. Thank you for sharing, guys. Okay, so we started to talk about families and keeping in contact with families. So the next question was, how do you stay in contact with families whose first language is not English? And what are some obstacles that you might run into while you're trying to stay in communication with them? Jess?
Oh, okay. So at the beginning of the year, I usually send home like a getting to know you survey to my families, and I ask what is the best way to communicate with them, and I try and give them options, like phone calls, email, or Talking Points, which is an app I use. I have it on my computer, but I also have it on my phone, and I'm able to input the family's information, and then I choose their native language. So that way, I I can type to them in English and it translates to them in their native language. They can respond to me in their native language and it gets to me in English. So we have that. It's through, I want to say, Google Translate, so it's not always perfect, but I usually keep my sentences very basic, so that way there shouldn't be too much lost in translation. And a lot of my families prefer that. They don't have to download the app. They can just use it as like a text messaging way, as long as they text the same number back. And a lot of my families prefer that. They also like email because they're able to copy and paste in their
Yeah.
native language if needed. Phone calls, because we don't see that face-to-face communication and they can't read lips over the phone, but sometimes we'll do Google Meets. I try and do I don't know what I even call it, like a feature Friday, where I try and pick one of my students and send an email or talking points home, like, so-and-so had a great week. This is something that they excelled in, and I'm so proud of him, kind of thing, just so the parents, hear from me, not just their classroom teacher. And if the classroom teacher is not always communicating or not always able to do those things, like, at least they're hearing it from me. And what's nice about my position is I usually have them K-5, so I
That's your dog.
really get that communication. Sorry.
No worries. We're all in a setting, right? So we all have I'd shut the door, but my cat's out there probably meowing because it's around his like dinner time. So
I think also too with family communication, my school sends a lot of emails. We use Parent Square. I use Talking Points as well, which I love that app because it does allow you to text in English and them to get the text in their native language. I live in the neighborhood where majority of my kids live, so I see them outside of school as well. So I think that's a big plus. I actually have been over to one of my students' houses for dinner because a parent asked, I did something for a parent and she said, come over to my house for tacos. So, I think that also builds a relationship because you want to know your kids. So getting to know their cultures is amazing by going to their house and showing that you care that way. My parents call me all the time on my phone, all the time. And also like working with the kids outside of school. So I coached soccer for 3 seasons. So I built my relationship that way as well.
that's great.
At Pine Hills, we have language line, and
Language.
it's an automatic. It's a translation service so that you can call them and it can translate into their native language. We also, when there's papers being sent home, our school actually does it. They do it themselves. They translate it into the languages that we have in the classroom so that we can send them out. And if I want to send something to them, I use School Tool and I can see what language needs to be sent out, and I try my best to translate it on my own and send it out. So that helps.
That's great.
So my district also uses Parent Square, and if anybody's not familiar with Parent Square, the user can decide whatever language that they can read their messages in. So our district, we've actually received messages this year about how nice it is. I believe as a father of a student, he said it was the very first time he ever received any sort of message from a district that he could read actually in his own native language. So it's really having a huge impact on these families to be able to read messages in their own home languages. So I think that's an awesome thing. Parent Square is an awesome way for us to kind of reach out to families and stay in contact with families. At the beginning of the school year, I called all of my homeroom's parents, and I quickly realized that the language barriers were getting in the way of us and our conversations. Like, we were both agreeing with each other and having a nice conversation about their student and their culture. However, we were both missing very key points that we were talking about. So using Parent Square was a great way to kind of make sure we can communicate accurately and we can communicate thoughtfully enough to where we can each see exactly what the other one's trying to say and exactly what we mean when they say it. So keeping that communication open with Parent Square, it's been super cool to be able to have that communication line at all times.
That's great. And Nadia, did you want to add something as well?
Yes, first off, I've been jotting down all the resources everyone's been sharing. Mine isn't as elaborate, but I was gonna say something that's come up at our school a lot. We're very fortunate in that a lot of the scholars that we do um, have older siblings. So at that primary level, oftentimes we'll find some of those older siblings can sort of help in being and sort of sending some of those messages back and forth as well, and ensuring that communication takes place. So
Yeah, and it's very important, right, that you guys were all kind of touching on this, but if there's a way for the parents to feel comfortable with talking to you, then they'll feel more comfortable with asking questions. And so then if they do have any concerns, then they're not necessarily just kind of like waiting until a report card time to talk to you about it, but they feel free to ask you at any given point when they're actually concerned, when the concern actually comes into play. And then Melissa says, yeah, also the translation line 800-889-5921. And it's given through the DOE. And so you can call, and then I believe, Melissa, if I'm correct, that you call and you tell them which language that you need, and then they connect you with somebody who can translate, correct? And then we did have some people who yes, great. And then yes, Class Dojo is a very popular one as well, and that also does the translation. And then we also had a family communication. The Remind app allows you to communicate with parents, and it translates for you and for the parent. So there's a lot of great options that you can take, and that I think it's great that I know a lot of schools use the Class Dojo app, and I think Jessica, you were talking about talking points and so if you're using it as like a school-wide thing, then then the communication is connected, especially if you're an out of classroom teacher, then you can get the classroom teacher can also see, and that you can see that there's a communication there. So that's wonderful. That's great. Thanks, guys. Number 6 question. We have 2 more questions. So there has been conversation around the idea that there is an influx of students whose first language is not English that are enrolling in schools. Jada, you kind of touched on this with now having to have 2 classrooms of English language learners and how that's changed in your the school structure. So my question was technically that. Can you talk more about how this is shown in your school? Have classrooms kind of look different? Have your classrooms look different, or your groups look different throughout the last year or so because of this? And has your school need to make changes, any structural changes, and that kind of stuff?
I guess I'll jump in. Yeah, that we have a huge influx of ELL learners that typically we get about in the past 7 or 8 in a class in a grade maybe. This year we have about 20 that came in, and we do not just have a classroom full of ELL learners. We want to integrate them with everyone else, and so in order to do that, that's why we had to split them up into 2 classrooms. It has allowing me to be more creative. You know, I'm not used to having so many ELLs in the room, so I have to be creative to find ways that they are learning, because it's important that I optimize their instructional time, and I really want them to, and it's amazing to see them fit in and sit and to see them on so many different levels. I even have an L teaching another L English, but he's just better at Spanish than, he's better at English than he is with Spanish. And it's just, they're both doing it together. I'm like, yes, please, I need you. You're helping me. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but you are. I'm like, Jordy, como se dice this? And he's helping me. I'm just really creative. I've been, even I feel like I have to go home and I'm like, how do I say this so that they can at least understand me in this way, and I can like translate to them in the classroom. But it's been difficult, but it's allowing me to be more creative and reach out to more resources. So
yeah, it builds that like relationship, right? And then the kids are more confident if they're able to then like support you and like help you out too in those little like moments. You're like, how do you say this?
And I want them to know that I am trying to help them out too. I want them to know that I see you, I hear you. I want you to know that I understand you. Do you understand me? You know, I want them to do that.
And I was like, I'm trying with you. So then like,
Yeah.
you know, you're like safe to like try with me. Like you might sound silly to them. And so, and they might sound like they want, or they might feel like they're not, they're like, oh, I don't want anyone to make fun of me if I'm saying something, but you're like, well, I'm
Right.
trying too. So if we're both kind of trying it out, then yeah, it builds that like comfort level, which is great.
Exactly.
Anyone else? How has that kind of changed? Have you seen a change? Have you not seen a change in your schools?
We've seen a change in terms of getting newcomers in high school, and we're in new high school, so you know, we definitely have to look into like their credit accumulation because they're coming older and older. So, you know, that becomes a struggle because we have been in middle school for so long. Now that we've added a high school, we have seen it a little bit more, but when we get new kids, there are already kids coming in maybe at the expanding level, so we don't really see the newcomers as much.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it's more the issue that the newcomers are coming in. There's more of the newcomer L's coming in into the high school level as opposed to they're typically at the middle school level.
Yes.
Hmm. Has your school done, so I know Jada had mentioned that they hired new English language, 2 new English NL teachers?
We have 3 teachers. Because my number of kids will fluctuate at 8th grade, so I service 8th through 11th grade.
Oh, okay. And has there been any other structural changes? Have they added anybody else into your building because of the number of new latecomers? But I guess you don't necessarily always know when the newcomers are.
No, because like I said, we are an open enrollment school, so we don't know when they're coming.
Yeah. Always a surprise, but yeah. Everyone else is good in their schools. All right. All right. Well, then the last question that I have for us, and this is the last chance for our participants, if you have any questions related, if you have any questions or any other comments that you want to share, any of the resources that you maybe use that we haven't mentioned, add it to the Q&A section so we can shout them out. Our last question is, there is a lot happening politically in the world. There's a lot of big changes and a lot of things happening. So depending on your school setting as well, are any of the world events addressed in your schools? And if they are, how are they addressed? And also is it kind of affecting your students as well? I'm terrible. I asked you 3 different questions. And so let's just focus on the one question, which is, let's focus on the first question. So like, are they being addressed at your schools? Are any of the events being addressed at your schools?
I would say for me, not right now. You know, we do talk about it as adults, but with the kids, not so much.
So my district, we try to find healthy talking points to bring up in class for those students who do have questions. So we try to find types of like sensitive sources that explain just enough detail to our 7th graders, a little bit of background so they understand what's going on without leading into too deep of a discussion. But I do also know that our district does offer those students who are really, really close to these certain events. They offer them separate types of help, like with the counselors and with psychologists in the building. Last spring, I worked with a student who was from Belarus and came from Belarus because of the Ukrainian conflict. So that student was absolutely wonderful in class, but you could tell there was a lot going through that student's mind. He had just moved to the other side of the world. So much was different, and it was all in this new language now. So that school was able to provide that student with a ton of different supports. And that school was able to help me help this student talk about it in a healthy way and try to just work through events as they try to work through a whole new language as well. So the districts around here, I believe, they're trying to do their part in helping everybody around these events and trying to help everybody kind of cope through them together while keeping that level of respect very high.
That's great. I love all that support from like the whole school system. Anyone else see any differences? And I think I was mentioning, yeah, that if there are any issues. So, John, that's wonderful that you had that support for the student with the guidance counselor and all of that. It makes sense. Never really considered it, but it makes sense. And Yvonne has said that she hasn't seen any new immigrants at the school, at her school. Okay. That's fantastic. All right. So to round it all out for us, I wanted to, I lied. This is technically the last question. What is one piece of advice that you have for other teachers, given the position that you're in? What's the advice that you would want them to know?
I would say patience is key. It can be very tough on both parts, the child and you, to try to include them in everything and try to make sure that they're getting the information that you're giving them. But just to be patient and to always, even in every aspect, just make sure you're giving them that extra attention. I hate to say extra attention, but it's true. They have a barrier and they need the extra attention to do that, and just to make sure that they're being reached. So I would say being patient, work with them, just keep an eye on them, especially if you have a bigger classroom. I mean, I have 16 and about 8 of them are half of them. So, they're always on my radar. They're always on my watch, making sure that they're getting me. Even if I'm teaching whole group, maybe I'm calling on this kid a little bit more. I want to make sure that I'm hearing them, not everyone else. I want to make sure that they're getting to me. Sorry for my blurriness. I'm sorry. It's like I'm a blurb talking.
Upsetting. So upsetting that we can't see you clearly, but thank you though, Jada. Appreciate it. Thank you. Nadia.
I would say one biggest piece of advice, and I know it may sound a little cliche, but putting yourself in your scholar's shoes, like really picturing and I get every student situation is just so different, right? But really thinking for them what it's like when you have, you're surrounded by language all day. And I've seen it sometimes in our own L's faces, just the sense of overwhelm and the exhaustion that comes from trying to process and translate everything all day long, right? And I think as teachers, we have that sort of superpower as far as looking for what our scholars' needs are. And I think really honing in on that and giving yourself that grace, but also giving the scholar that grace as well. I feel like I do this a lot more so now, being a special educator. I'll sometimes give a direction and then say, you know what, let me try that again. Just due to economy of language and just me noticing in hindsight, okay, that was a lot of vocab at once. So let me try it again, right? So just keeping those things in mind, I think is great.
I mean, RN teachers is just the best at quick reflection, just always in that moment, be like, oh, hold on. Great. One piece of advice.
I think
Also,
know your kids before they come in to your classroom. Try to find out as much information before they come in.
Mm-hmm.
also, and it can be hard to do as a teacher, not to put anyone blast, but not to shorthand them. Sometimes we can find ourselves, because of the challenge, we may not give them that full attention. We may not give them, because it's harder. So you have to put yourself in that hard place. And I love, I think Nadia, you said to put yourself in their shoes. That was a great, if you were them, how would you want me to respond to you? How do you want me to talk to you? What is the best? And that was a good way to describe it.
All right. Anyone else want another last go of good advice? I think that oh, John, yeah.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say is the student would come into your classroom with this obvious barrier of language, but it's so important to realize language might be one of the smallest barriers that they're going through at that time. So you never know why this student showed up in your class. You don't know how the student got there right away. So understanding language is just part of the barrier at the moment. Like, as I mentioned, my student from Belarus, there was many things going on and school was not the priority in that moment. So it took that student time to open up again. It took that student time to kind of start gaining the English language because there was just so much going on in his world. So language at sometimes is just the beginning of it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And that's a great reminder, right? Is that it's like really reaching to the whole student, not just to what you want to see them in like proven, but also like reaching the like whole student. There's a lot of also great messages in the Q&A about being patient, welcoming, that community that you build. That's always great. And the last thing that I would just like to add is just to be give yourself grace as the teacher in whatever position that you're in, because it is difficult and it's a lot, and you don't just have the one struggle. It's a lot of different struggles, and you have the personalities of all the different kinds of students that are in your classroom. So give yourself grace. You are doing the best that you can in your position.
Wow, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic professional development, tons of information, but more than anything, thank you to our moderator and panelists and audience. I got to tell you, it was amazing to see so much interaction and response, and the gut reaction, that feeling you get, is how lucky our students are to be surrounded by all of these phenomenal educators. Honestly, the last hour, I wish more people could have even participated, because it is just so telling in how lucky these students are. You are incredible educators. One last reminder before we sign off, CTLE information is actually listed in the Q&R, listed in the chat. So please go in, copy, paste it, save it. There's information there to acquire all CTLE credits that you need. Thank you so much for attending. We hope to see you at the next professional development. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.